This episode of Around the Oval is brought to you by Todd Pennington with Revolution Mortgage.
Hey, Ohio State fans, Alex Gleitman here, back with another edition of Around the Oval brought to you by Todd Pennington with Revolution Mortgage. The Buckeyes are coming off another kind of high blood pressure victory for fans, 26-17 win in Lincoln over Nebraska. The Buckeyes now do improve and they advance to 8-1 on the season. They are undefeated in conference, remain in place to win the Big Ten, make the college football playoff. They moved up to 4 in the rankings this week, and they sit atop the Big East or the Big Ten East standings. But the home stretch is up ahead. Game at home against Purdue, game home against Michigan State, and then game on the road against Michigan. So they'll face numbers 19, 7, and 6 before facing at this point, it looks like a Wisconsin team maybe that's ranked 18th in the country. So definitely won't be easy. Everything will be earned for Ohio State if they do make the college football playoff. To talk about what's been going on with the Buckeyes, they've been struggling a little bit on the offensive side of the ball. And then talk a little bit about the defense as well and the home stretch coming up is Ross Fulton, our in-house X's and O's expert at Buckeye Scoop. Ross, thanks for joining the show. As always, appreciate your time.
Yeah, happy to be here, Alex.
Yeah, for sure. And so let's dive into it. I mean, for me, we were just talking before the show a little bit. Let's talk about the OSU offense. And I personally am a little nervous if it's a team not named Akron, Rutgers, Maryland, or Indiana. Ohio State has looked fairly pedestrian on offense. Even if they put up big yards like they have the last couple of weeks or in the Oregon game, they haven't necessarily been able to run the ball effectively. If you look at their point totals the last couple of weeks, what was it? 33 against Penn State, I think it was. And it was 26 against Nebraska. Those certainly aren't what we're used to seeing for Ohio State. So I guess, Ross, my question to you is, what are your thoughts on the Ohio State offense right now? Why do they look off? And what are some of the issues that you're seeing within that unit?
Yeah, so I think there's some things that are off and need corrected. I think that everyone is starting from a position of expecting so much that any hiccups are considered a problem. I mean, Ohio State's still first or second in offense and like the advanced statistical rankings, SP plus, FEI. So they're really good offense. I mean, they've moved the ball in both of these last two games. They've had a lot of yards in both. It's really just not converting things into points, and there's a variety of reasons for that. They actually ran the football better against Nebraska than they did against Penn State. I mean, most of their plays were successful. They just weren't getting like chunk yardage. They weren't really creating explosive plays in either the run or the pass game against Nebraska. And that just makes it harder to score. And so then when you're not, when you have to drive the length of the field and then you start doing things like penalties, sacks, et cetera, that is the epitome, I guess, from the opposite side of a bend but don't break defensive approach. And so, they don't have obviously a quarterback run threat. And so that can create challenges when you're getting outnumbered in the box and make it a little harder to run the football. There's ways to address it. So, they can involve Stroud a little bit more. They can run pass options. You're going to have to be able to throw the ball well, including in short yardage. I mean, Stroud missed a couple against Nebraska, that 4th down throw to Jeremy Ruckert, the 3rd and 2 near the goal line to Jackson Smith and Jigba. Like, you got to have those. And then they also are the offensive line is it's struggling with teams that are teams are now like slanting and stunting like crazy against them because they've seen it work. So they're going to keep doing it. And it's just really causing problems in their zone steps. I mean, I do think, I've talked to you about this before the season. I was really concerned about moving everyone around. You've got like these 2 great tackles. Why are you, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. So you now do have a situation where you have essentially 5 starters who all have never played the position they're at before. And so they're seeing a lot of things for the first time and they're having to work together. And then you put that together with illnesses, injuries, guys are having to move around, not easy for like a Nicholas Petit-Frere, especially it sounds like he was out with injury, missed some practice last week to jump from left tackle to right tackle, then back to left tackle, or for Thayer Munford to go from left guard to tackle back to guard. So that messes with coordination, cohesion. So all this to say is like nothing is like irreversibly broken. I think there's some things they can do to clean it up, but like at some level, like, a couple things go differently against Nebraska. You don't get one of those holding calls. You don't get one of those sacks. And we're talking about a very different thing. So I think they're close. They're still getting yards. They're just things in both the scheme and execution that need cleaned up.
Yeah, I think you bring up some great points. And like, if they convert maybe half of the red zone field goals into touchdowns, they probably win both the Penn State and Nebraska games by 21 plus points. And you're sitting here feeling pretty good about where Ohio State is. And for me, I just think, a lot of the focus this week, if I'm Ryan Day in practice, has to be around the discipline. The penalties in the red zone have been absolutely killer. It's been putting them behind the chains, and it makes it harder to run the ball in those circumstances, which, is a criticism of people. But I just think like maybe what Ryan Day needs to do is like simplify things a little bit. Like, why on 4th and 1 do you need to make a higher risk throw to Jeremy Ruckert down the field? I understand that if he catches that ball, everyone's like praising Day, what a play call, everyone was expecting a run, but Nebraska was giving to me, my naked eye, I was just like, those like 4 or 5 yard dump offs in the passing game were like there all day, and no pun intended. And I just think that like sometimes Day is getting a little too cute and just making things a little bit more difficult. They have better players than 99% of the teams, if not 100% of the teams that they're playing, at least not when they're on offense. And so I guess my question to you is, if you're Ryan Day, how do you fix it?
So I think what he's trying to do is, again, I think he's trying to generate explosive plays. Like, they're just not getting explosives. He even talked about in his press conference this week that like Nebraska was basically giving him the middle of the field. And I mean, Jackson Smith and Jigba went wild, and, but they were going to live with that. And, so when you have opportunities, I have trouble faulting that play again, because it was a great call in that situation. Nebraska was basically selling out. We'd gone the week before where Ohio State continued to struggle in short yardage. Maybe they could have snuck it there. Maybe they could have swung it out, but like, it's cover 0. You have Jeremy Ruckert on a linebacker, and like CJ Stroud holds the ball too long. I mean, people blamed Ruckert for dropping that. But like, if he throws it in time, it's an easy catch because he's got 3 yards on the guy. And so, I mean, at some level, like, again, though, it's CJ Stroud's a redshirt freshman. Trevion Henderson, he's not, pushing the tracks in the run game. Like, there's times where like it's also on him in the running game, but like, he's a true freshman. It's like, as I said, they are a very, very young team, and so you're seeing mistakes. And again, I think that to the extent that your quarterback is not a particular run threat, I think he can do some things, but in those short yardage, like, you do have to hit some passing opportunities at some point. Even if I understand you can fault the pushing it down the field there versus, maybe you run a bootleg, a rollout and try to throw it to Ruckert on a, sort of like a delay release. But, again, it's these like small things, right? Because like I can go back before that play even in like that 3rd and short, and they run that little pause option. They ran it twice in short yardage, which like after the Penn State game, like they need to do something to the halfback side because like teams are overcommitting, again, like slanting away from him, like to stop the zone play. But like Stroud needed to pitch it out, and it was an easy first down, and then he didn't get it. And so it's like, it's funny because I like literally what I do is try to give meaning to everything. And sometimes there is just like some randomness that like comes up and catches you. But because when you don't create some explosive plays, you make your margin for error smaller. And frankly, not having Garrett Wilson hurts you on that front too.
Yeah, I think obviously a lot of people were like, well, they got Emeka Egbuka, they got Marvin Harrison, they got Julian Fleming. And I know it's the latter two who fill Wilson's spot. And I get it. They're good players. There's no like crazy concern. It's not like losing your quarterback and having to put in a backup. But at the same time, I mean, Garrett Wilson is going to be a first-round NFL draft pick this year. And for the defense to not have to account on him and say, okay, let Marvin Harrison Jr. or Julian Fleming beat us, I think that definitely changes the game a little bit. So, I'm glad you said that.
Yeah, and they're also, I mean, anytime you lose an All-American, it matters, right, in a first-round draft pick, especially because I'll probably be proven wrong over the next year or two in this statement, but like to me, at first glance, like Fleming and Harrison are more of possession guys, just compared to Garrett Wilson, right? Like especially like if you're going to leave the middle of the field open like that, he's the guy who can like take that ball and break it outside and turn it into an explosive play. And so, anytime you take that person away, and same thing, like again, like DeJuan Jones didn't start, and so they had to shuffle the line. Then Petit Frere went out, so they had to shuffle the line again. And again, offensive line play is just so much about cohesion and working together that it just again is something that makes it a little harder than it needs to be.
Yeah, I mean, I like Matt Jones, so like I like that they're trying to get him in, and I know DeJuan was dealing with like an illness or whatever before the game, but I almost like when he was out, like I was almost like just stick with the lineup, just stick with if this is what you're rolling with, just stick with it. And I'd like this week, whatever the lineup is, stick with it. We'll see what happens, but I know that they continuously every week talk about we have no problem rotating guys in and this and that, but I agree with you. I think they got to stick with it. I will say, I think on the defensive side of the ball, a big positive is I think they've looked better. I think that the middle of the field between the safeties and linebackers, that kind of like second into the third level is a little susceptible. And that's if I was an opposing team, if I'm Purdue, I'm just attacking that all day. I think the linebackers don't get enough depth when they drop into zone. I don't think they're really good in pass coverage in general. I mean, they've obviously been dealing with personnel and trying to figure that out. And then Josh Proctor going down certainly doesn't help, because I know while Bryson Shaw has not been a killer, I mean, I thought last week he wasn't very good, and I think a better team might be able to expose him out there. But I think overall, I mean, you talk about they gave up 17 points. They gave up 24 points to Penn State last week. And I think while there was guys still flying way too wide open and things along those lines, a couple of big plays this weekend against Nebraska, you give up 17 or 24 points with this offense that they have, they should win every single game. And so I wanted your thoughts on the defense. Do you think that they are better? I mean, I think that it's a no-brainer. They're definitely better since the beginning of the season. But how do you feel the defense has looked, and where do you still think that they have room for improvement?
Yeah, I mean, it's they went from essentially like scheme-wise being a clown show to like now they look like a competent, normal defense, which in of itself makes a big difference. I mean, they mix coverages against, as I talked about in my article this week against Penn State. I think they decided, like with all the RPOs Penn State used, like we're going to use a lot of cover 3 pressures, blitz a linebacker. Oh, while we drop a defensive end back, change the read. Against Nebraska, where you're getting all the read option game with the running back or wide receiver going one way, the quarterback the other. We're going to play cover 4 so that we have both safeties who can come down and account on each side of it. So they've given themselves tools, right? At least, and they can mix things up. To the Nebraska our discussion, I mean, part of the giving up the middle of the field is partly scheme driven. I mean, those are what they'll settle for, and it's partly linebackers. I do think the linebackers have gotten much better. They've changed the technique in what they're doing in those middle of the field, and so that's helped. Steel Chambers is much better in coverage as a will linebacker, so that makes a difference. But then again, as we saw, they against Penn State, they played, softer zone cover 3 on third down. They gave up some of those third downs. So they played more cover 1 against Nebraska. And, that it worked pretty well, except for the 2 touchdowns. I still question why they're rotating at some positions at this point in time. I think it's like time to lock people in. Like, I don't think Marcus Williamson can leave the field for what he's doing. I don't think I would have ever said that before the season, but like he's been too effective. And so, there's no need to pull guys like that off. And now because offensive lines and opponents don't know where the pass rush is coming from every time, like now they're getting a lot of pressure from their defensive line, and that's starting to show. And obviously Tyreek Smith being healthy has made a big difference, but it also helps that they can't chip and double those guys necessarily because they have to deal with blitzes.
Yeah, I was going to say, for me, the biggest difference is seeing the defensive line play how I think I expected them to before this year, especially Zach Harrison and Tyreek Smith. Haskell Garrett, I think they're just trying to be careful with his lingering injury, and I'd like to see him on the field more because obviously he was such an impactful player last year. But if this defensive line can continue to play as they have, I think it's going to make the defense's job a lot easier the next few games.
Yeah, for sure. And like, at the beginning of the season, against Oregon, for instance, they were really hurt because they tried to play Garrett at nose guard, right? And so they could get Teron Vincent on the field. And both those guys like aren't noses. And now they're getting a lot of production from like the Antoine Jackson and Jerron Cages of the world, who are like who are happy to be nose guards, who are beating double teams, making plays against the run. And so that's just making everyone else's life easier as well.
Yeah, and Jerron Cage was hurt in the beginning of the year, so getting him back he's a big boy, so I think that helps. And Tyleek Williams coming on certainly allows them to use more personnel and keep guys more fresh. Same with the defensive ends. I mean, Jack Sawyer, I thought, had a heck of a game last week before he came out. JT Tuimoloau, I didn't really notice him too much last game, but I think he's been getting better every single time he's in there. So having more defensive linemen they can rely on, I think that maybe the beginning of the year is certainly helpful too. Let's talk about the last three games, and then we'll end things here. So as I said, number 19 Purdue comes to Ohio State this week. Number 7 Michigan State the next week. At number 6 Michigan. We won't talk about the Big Ten championship just because we don't know how we play. I mean, in your mind, I guess, how confident are you that Ohio State can run the table the next three, or will run the table the next 3 games? I have some reservations. I'm kind of like a seeing is believing type of person. And like, I like the steps that the defense is going, but I'd really like to see the offense be able to, not be so like fractured against the team with a pulse and kind of like run on all cylinders like they did against some of the bad teams that they played. So I'll go second, but I wanted to get your thoughts, Ross, on this home stretch. How do you think they're going to do? 3-0, 2-1, 1-2, 0-3, and then if which team worries you the most?
I mean, I still feel pretty confident with the caveat, obviously, like, when you add it together, playing 3 teams back to back to back, no matter who you are, it increases your odds of losing a game. So, like, again, like, I think an SP plus, they have basically like a 50-50 shot at this point to go to win out the rest of the next 3 games, just because they're playing 3 teams that are pretty good. And so, ironically, Nebraska is at about in the advanced statistics, about the same level as both Purdue and Michigan State. There's actually a big distinct difference between the two on Purdue, but so, regardless of record, so they did just play like a frankly top 25 team, like in both statistical things. So, obviously, to me, Michigan is by the best team of the 3 of them, and they have to play at Michigan. And Michigan's defense is really good. And so, I think, they can give up some big plays, but they can make plays up front as well. So I'd probably say that one, but, I tend to, I think in college football every year, this kind of happens, right? Where every team has a few clunkers. Like we can go back through every season of Ohio State football, even when they win national championships or end up in the Final Four, the championship game. And there's games where they barely beat a team and people, causes tons of concern. I think the offense can get it together. I don't think that is still the worry point. I think all they need is to sort of get a touchdown or 2, get a couple of those breaks going their way. And I think that the dam can break in the other direction. And, with the defense playing how it is, I think that keeps them in every game until that happens. So I think they're still in a pretty good position.
Yeah, I mean, I think despite my nervousness about them, it's better that the offense is the one having some troubles, and because I think that's obviously Ryan Day's expertise, and 2, and they're also more talented there. And I'll also say that I'll say that, like, number 2, it's also really hard to just bet against Ohio State finding a way to get it done, because as you mentioned, like, history shows us they get it done, and this is a weird year of college football, so maybe they don't get it done. And Michigan, I would say Michigan absolutely worries me, but they played what we thought were some pretty good Michigan defenses in 2018, 2019, and they carved the crap out of them. I think Michigan, I do think their front 7's really good. I think Ohio State's going to have trouble running the ball. I think Michigan hasn't faced a team that can challenge them vertically the way that Ohio State potentially can with their receivers. So I'm excited to see that matchup and how Ryan Day plays that. And, not having played that game last year, there's going to be a little extra juice in that one probably. But yeah, I would agree. I think Michigan, I think Purdue this week, I think them coming off that big win I think Ohio State usually like this is like they try to figure things out and work it out and they end up like winning these games by a lot of points. I think they're going to win by like 21 plus. I think they'll cover the spread this week. I think Michigan State, like they might be looking ahead to Michigan a little bit. Obviously, Michigan State wins. They still have this week. They still have their Big Ten hopes alive. So they'll be motivated. That will be kind of like their Super Bowl to some extent at that point. And I think that could be a little bit of a closer game. But I do think Ohio State is the better team. I think they'll win. Like I don't think the game will ever be in doubt, but I think that they'll win like a little uncomfortably, I guess. And then I really don't know against Michigan. I think you just hope to come away from that game up 1 point when the scoreboard says 0. But I think they'll get it done. And then I honestly think that the Wisconsin or Iowa, whoever they play, I think they match up really well with those teams. So I don't think it will be much of a problem. But I probably said the same against Northwestern last year or Wisconsin the year before too. So we'll see. But yeah, Ross, thanks for joining the show. Appreciate your thoughts. It's going to be really exciting to watch and follow this Ohio State team the next 3 weeks. We're going to have amazing content for, both free and especially for subscribers on buckeyescoop.com. So be sure to check it out, subscribe, even do a one month trial with us, test it out, see how you like it. And we'll be looking forward to watching the game this week and seeing how Ohio State's stretch run turns out. Thanks everyone. See you next week.
This episode of Around the Oval was brought to you by Todd Pennington with Renovation Mortgage. If you've been thinking about refinancing or buying a house, check out our sponsor, Todd Pennington with Revolution Mortgage. They offer low rates for refinancing and home purchase loans, including first-time home buyer programs, down payment assistance, and cash-out home equity loans. Check out revolutionmortgage.com/tpennington.